A dying Alpha King's last request. Welcome to the Story King, where every tale captivates your soul. The Alpha King was dying, and everyone knew it except the one person he needed most. Elara pressed herself against the cold stone wall outside the throne room, her heart hammering as heated voices echoed through the heavy oak doors. She shouldn't be here. Omegas weren't permitted near the king's chambers, especially not her, a virgin Omega whose presentation had come late, marking her as an outcast even among her own kind. Your Majesty, you must choose an Omega from the noble houses, Lord Cassius insisted, his voice sharp with urgency. The bloodline demands. I don't have time for your political games, King Draven's voice cut through, rougher than Elara remembered. 3 months had passed since she'd last glimpsed him at the Harvest Festival, strong and commanding. Now, even through the door, she could hear the weakness threading through his words. Bring me the girl, the one from the eastern orchards. Elara's blood turned to ice. The commoner, Cassius sputtered. She's untouched, unprepared, and completely unsuitable for. Then it's perfect, Draven interrupted, and something in his tone made Elara's Omega instincts flare with both fear and inexplicable longing. She'll have no expectations, no agenda, just, bring her to me. Tonight. The sound of approaching footsteps sent Elara fleeing down the corridor, her simple linen dress catching on the rough stones. She didn't stop running until she reached the servants' quarters, bursting through the door and collapsing against it, chest heaving. Elara, her friend Mira looked up from mending linens, concern flooding her features. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, Elara whispered. The king has summoned me. 2 hours later, Elara stood before the king's private chambers, flanked by stone-faced guards who refused to meet her eyes. She'd been scrubbed, perfumed, and dressed in a silk nightgown that made her feel more exposed than protected. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but where could an Omega go when an Alpha King commanded her presence? The doors swung open. The chamber was dimly lit by dozens of candles, their warm light flickering across rich tapestries and ornate furniture. But Elara barely noticed the opulence. Her entire focus locked onto the man sitting in a high-backed chair near the fireplace. King Draven looked nothing like the powerful Alpha who had stood before his people 3 months ago. His once bronzed skin held an ashen pallor, and dark circles shadowed eyes that had lost the golden luster. But even diminished, even dying, his presence filled the room with an authority that made her Omega's soul tremble. Come here, he said softly, gesturing to a cushioned seat across from him. Please. The please surprised her. Kings didn't say please, especially not to common Omegas. Elara moved forward on shaking legs, lowering herself onto the seat. She kept her eyes downcast, as was proper, but she could feel the weight of his gaze on her like a physical touch. Do you know why you're here? He asked. No, Your Majesty, she whispered. A soft, bitter laugh escaped him. Look at me, Elara. She lifted her eyes, startled that he knew her name. Up close, she could see the slight tremor in his hands, the way he held himself too carefully, as if movement caused pain. But his eyes, when they met hers, they still held that fierce intelligence, that commanding presence that marked him as Alpha. I'm dying, he said bluntly. The poison is winning, and the healers have given me perhaps 3 more days. Elara's hand flew to her mouth. The rumors are true then. But surely, there is no cure, not one my people can provide, at least. He leaned forward slightly, and she caught his scent, pine and smoke and something darker, something that called to her Omega nature despite her fear. But there is a possibility. An old magic, older than the kingdom itself. I don't understand what this has to do with me. My grandmother was a seer, Draven continued, his voice growing rougher. Before she died, she told me that if I were ever to face death by poison, my salvation would lie with an unclaimed Omega, one who bore the mark of the crescent moon and carried the scent of wild jasmine. Elara's hand unconsciously moved to her left shoulder, where a small birthmark in the shape of a crescent moon had appeared during her presentation. And she did work in the jasmine orchards, the scent clinging to her skin no matter how much she washed. You're saying I can save you? Hope and disbelief warred in her chest. Perhaps. His jaw tightened. The magic requires intimacy. One night, at dawn, if the magic holds true, the poison will be purged from my system. If not, he trailed off, shaking his head. I'm asking you to spend the night with me, Elara. Not as a command, as a request. I won't force you, despite what my advisors would prefer. You're asking a virgin Omega to. She couldn't finish the sentence, heat flooding her cheeks. To possibly save my life, yes. But I need you to understand what you'd be risking. He stood, moving toward the window with obvious difficulty. If this fails and I die anyway, you'll be blamed. The noble houses will call you a curse. You could be exiled or worse. And if it succeeds, he turned back to her, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his expression. Then I'll owe you everything. But I can't offer you what you might hope for. I can't make you my queen. The nobility would never accept it. I can give you wealth, land, protection, but not love, she finished quietly. Not a true mate bond. Something flickered across his face, pain, perhaps, or regret. I lost my fated mate 5 years ago. She died in childbirth along with our son. I've been empty since then. I can offer you affection, respect, gratitude, but not the bond you deserve. Elara stood, her decision crystallizing even as her hands shook. She crossed the space between them, stopping just before him. This close, she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, see the slight sheen of sweat on his brow from the fever the poison caused. You gave food to my village during the famine 2 winters ago, she said softly. You rode through yourself to ensure the corrupt nobles didn't hoard it. You picked up my little sister when she fell, asked her name, made her laugh when she'd been crying from hunger. Draven's eyes widened slightly, as if he barely remembered the incident. You don't know me, your majesty, but I know you. I know the kind of king you are. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with more courage than she felt. If I can save you, I will. Not for wealth or land or protection. Because the kingdom needs you. And maybe, she hesitated, then pushed forward, maybe because I need to know what it feels like to be held by someone who sees me as more than just an Omega to be used. His hand lifted, trembling slightly, and cupped her cheek with surprising gentleness. I see you, Elara. I've seen you since the harvest festival when you laughed at the juggler and didn't bow when I passed because you were too enchanted by the performance. You were so full of joy, so alive. I thought, he swallowed hard, I thought if I could have even a fraction of that light near me in my darkest hour, perhaps I could face death with some grace. Then you'll face life instead, she whispered. I accept. The relief that flooded his features was so profound it made her chest ache. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with a strength that belied his weakened state, and buried his face in her hair. Thank you, he breathed against her temple. Whatever happens, thank you. The night passed in a haze of whispered conversations and gentle touches. Draven was nothing like what Elara had feared. He was patient, careful, asking her permission before every advance. He told her stories of his childhood, made her laugh despite the gravity of their situation, and held her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally came together, it was with a reverence that felt almost sacred. And as their bodies joined, something shifted in the air, a pulse of ancient magic that made the candles flare bright and the very stones of the castle seemed to hum with power. Draven gasped, his body going rigid, and for one terrible moment, Elara thought she'd killed him. Then light erupted from his chest, spreading through his veins like liquid gold, and he cried out, not in pain, but in what sounded like release. He collapsed beside her, breathing hard, and she clung to him in fear. Draven, your majesty, it's working, he gasped, pulling her closer. I can feel it, the poison is, God, it's burning away. He looked at her with wonder, his eyes beginning to regain the golden glow. "You did it. You actually did it." Relief crashed over her so powerfully that tears spilled down her cheeks. He kissed them away, murmuring reassurances and gratitude against her skin. They fell asleep tangled together as the first hints of dawn painted the sky pink and gold. Elara woke to an empty bed. For one horrible moment, she thought it had all been a dream. Then she saw the note on the pillow beside her, written in an elegant scrawl. "My council summons me. The poison is gone. You saved me. Return to your quarters. I'll send for you soon. Trust me, D." She dressed quickly in her simple clothes and slipped through the castle corridors, making it back to the servants' quarters without being seen. Mira pounced on her immediately, demanding details, but Elara could only shake her head, exhausted and overwhelmed. Days passed, then a week. No summons came. Elara returned to the orchards, trying to convince herself she'd expected nothing else. Kings made promises in moments of desperation that they couldn't keep in the light of day. She'd saved his life, and that would have to be enough. But at night, she touched her lips and remembered the gentleness in his voice, the way he'd held her like she was precious, the gratitude and something deeper she'd seen in his eyes. Then, on the 8th day, everything changed. She was picking jasmine when she heard horses approaching. Looking up, she saw a contingent of royal guards thundering down the orchard path, their armor glinting in the afternoon sun. At their head rode King Draven himself, looking healthy and powerful and heartbreakingly alive. He dismounted in a fluid motion and strode toward her, purpose in every step. The workers around her dropped into bows, but Elara stood frozen, jasmine blossoms clutched in her trembling hands. He stopped before her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Elara of the Eastern Orchards," he said, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "I have spent the last 8 days fighting my council, rewriting laws older than my grandfather, and making many powerful people very angry." She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. He dropped to one knee before her, and shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. "I told you I couldn't offer you everything," he continued, pulling a ring from his pocket, not ornate, but simple and beautiful, wrought in silver and set with a moonstone. "I told you I was empty, that I had nothing left to give but gratitude and respect." His voice dropped, meant for her alone. "I was wrong. Somewhere in that night, in your laughter and your courage and your impossible kindness, something in me woke up that I thought died with my mate. It's not the same, it's different, new, terrifying, but it's real." Tears blurred her vision. "I still can't promise you a fated bond. But I can promise you my heart, what's left of it. I can promise you a place at my side, as my queen, if you'll have me. I can promise you that every day for the rest of my life, I will work to be worthy of what you gave me." He held up the ring. "Elara, will you?" "Your Majesty." A guard's shout cut through the moment. Riders approaching from the north. They bear the crimson banner. The blood drained from Draven's face. He stood quickly, his hand moving to the sword at his hip. "The northern clans. They're 3 weeks early. What does it mean?" Elara asked, fear coiling in her stomach. He turned to her, and she saw something in his expression that chilled her, not fear, but grim recognition. "It means they know I was poisoned. They're coming to claim the throne while they think I'm weak." He cupped her face, his touch urgent. "It means I need your answer now, Elara. Because what I didn't tell you, what I couldn't tell you, is that the magic you worked didn't just heal me." "What do you mean?" His eyes bored into hers. "The ancient bonding, the one that saved my life, it's rare for a reason. It only works when..." He hesitated, then pushed forward. "When the Omega carries the Alpha's heir. Elara, the magic wouldn't have worked unless you were already pregnant. The old laws are clear, a king's pregnant mate cannot be set aside, no matter her birth. The council couldn't refuse you even if they wanted to." The world tilted. You knew this would happen." "No," he said fiercely. "I swear to you, I only suspected. The texts were ancient, unclear. I thought we'd have time, that I could court you properly, explain everything. But if the northern clans are here," he gripped her shoulders, "they'll try to kill you, Elara. They'll see you as the only thing standing between them and the throne. And what's growing inside you, our child, will be their primary target." Behind him, the dust cloud on the horizon grew larger, darker. "So I'm asking you now, will you be my queen? Will you let me protect you? Will you trust that what I feel for you is real, even though the timing is impossible?" Elara looked at the man before her, a king who'd been gentle in his darkest hour, who'd fought his counsel for her, who looked at her now with desperation and hope and something that might, just possibly, be love. She looked at the approaching army, at the guards tensing for battle, at the impossible choice before her. And she thought of the child inside her, their child, growing from magic and desperation and one night of unexpected tenderness. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I'll." An arrow screamed through the air, aimed directly at her heart. Draven moved with inhuman speed, pulling her behind him. The arrow struck his shoulder instead, and he roared in pain and fury, his alpha power exploding outward in a shockwave that sent jasmine blossoms swirling into the sky like snow. As guards rushed to surround them and war horns echoed across the valley, Draven turned to her, blood seeping through his tunic, his eyes blazing gold. "Hold on to me," he commanded, and she glimpsed in that moment the true power of the Alpha King, not diminished by poison or weakened by injury, but burning bright and terrible and absolutely determined to protect what was his. She grabbed his outstretched hand just as the first wave of northern warriors crested the hill, their battle cries splitting the air. And in the chaos and the blood and the beginning of war, Elara felt the flutter in her womb, barely there, impossibly early, but unmistakable. The child moved, the king roared, and everything changed forever. Thank you for reading with the Story King. Subscribe for more tales that will leave you breathless.